Hello everyone, so welcome to yet another episode of Polity Quick Revision series. So in this video, we'll talk about the governor. Here we'll take a look at the constitutional position of the governor, the discretionary powers associated with the governor, and many other such important things associated with the chapter on governor. Finally, we'll also take a look at some interesting questions from this particular topic. So without any further delay, let's get started.
In estimating the constitutional position of the governor, particular references are made to certain articles. Okay, these articles could be useful to you when you're writing your mains. But again, technicalities aside, okay, let's take a look at what the logic says or what exactly what are the functions here. The executive power of the state shall be vested in the governor and shall be exercised, either directly or by somebody subordinate to him in accordance with the constitution. Perfect. Now there shall be a council of ministers to aid and advise. And he is required or she is required to exercise his functions in his or her, except for those situations in which he can act or she can act in the discretion. Mostly it has to be in accordance with what the CM and the Council of Ministers suggest he has to follow, mostly. But there will be some cases, few cases, where governor has discretion. Okay, and the Council of Ministers shall be collectively responsible to the Legislative Assembly, not to the Legislative Council or not to the Vidhan Parishad. So, and this is a very good point here. Okay, it is clear that the constitutional position of the governor differs from the president in how many aspects? Two aspects. While the Constitution envisages the possibility of the governor acting at times in his discretion, there is no such possibility for the president, because what did we say? Governor has some constitutional discretion, okay, and some situational, but the president only situational. Okay, because in 1976 the ministerial advice, okay, has been made binding on the president. During 1976, for the Second Amendment, it was made, okay, it was made mandatory for the president to follow the minister, the chief minister, and the, let's say, the cabinet, or the prime minister and the cabinet, their sort of decision. It is made binding for these guys. For the governor, it is not the case. So does that? So who has more discretion, the president or the governor? Who has more discretion?
The governor.
It is the governor, because the governor has certain other roles. So for instance, when a bill is being passed, okay, it can be kept for the consideration of the president, and that is the governor's discretion. Okay, the constitutional discretion. It is me as a governor, it is my sort of discretion to decide that, hey, this is going to deal with some other things, okay, some important things. Maybe it interferes with some other states. It talks about trade and commerce, okay, interstate sort of travel, or any of these sort of aspects. So I'm going to leave it for the consideration, or reserve it for the consideration of the president. Excellent point, Manvi. Okay, and recommendation for the imposition of the president's rule. Right, the Council of Ministers will never say, okay, let us impose president's rule in the state. Right, that means the powers are going to be taken from the executive power there. So obviously they're not going to do that. So that also comes from the constitutional discretion of the governor, while exercising his functions as the administrator of an adjoining union territory. For instance, if I am, okay, the governor of Gujarat and they give me Daman and Diu or Dadra Nagar Haveli, okay, does that mean for Dadra Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu, I have to, I'm bound by COM of Gujarat? No. These aspects I'm going to decide by myself. So while all of these things make sense, there are some tiny sort of finer points in these chapters that we tend to sort of miss. And that is where, your 15 say, it comes to around 10. Okay, the number of right answers. It is because of lack of familiarity with some tiny sort of details that are there. And similarly, there are point number 4, for instance, when your sixth schedule. Okay, so determining the amount payable by the government of AMTM, right, Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, and Mizoram, okay, in these autonomous tribal and district councils as royalty from your mineral exploration. Okay, and similarly seeking information from the chief minister with regard to administrative and legislative matters of the state. So things like that. And apart from that, he has situational discretion as well. Where is it? Where is it? Okay, he also has situational discretion. Same thing as what we talked about for the president. So the governor has a little more sort of discretion than the president does. But what are those 5? You have to sort of get that in your mind. Okay, you have to sort of remember it. You have to sort of internalize it. Is that clear? Is this comfortable? And if it is not 100% set in your mind, please go ahead and highlight this, okay, and underline this, so that you know that when you're coming for the next round of revision, you're going to sort of revisit it, and you're going to revisit it a couple of more times than the rest of the chapter. Okay. Now that you know everything about the president and the governor, let's try to solve some questions. The parliament by law may appoint the governor of a state as the administrator of an adjoining union territory. Option number B. If the governor of a state is appointed to act as an administrator of an adjoining union territory, he shall exercise his functions as such administrator independently of his council of ministers from the state. 1 only, 2 only, both, or neither. So what was the example that I gave? The governor of a state and also an administrator of the nearby union territory. You can think of Gujarat and let's say DND or DNH.
Option C.
Option C. The parliament by law can appoint a governor of the state. Okay, so governor of the state is appointed by
President.
okay, so president. Okay, so just be careful. So this part is going to be the president. And this president is the one who is going to sort of appoint the governor of the state as also the administrator. So the governor of, let's say, Gujarat as probably, hey, it is just like right beside you, right? So why not, your DD and DNH, why don't you handle this responsibility as well? Okay, so you don't need parliament to sort of make a law for this thing. All you need is the president to appoint. And president, does he do it by his own discretion? No, he does not. The president is going to follow the aid and advice of the prime minister and the council of ministers. Second option was whatever you said. Okay, so it is correct. He can function like his activities in DND and DNH are independent of the council of ministers, because council of ministers can only advise in their territory, and that is only in Gujarat. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you had like almost 100% right so far, but however, again, the place where I start seeing you guys go wrong is in tiny details. Okay, so remember, even if you feel comfortable with the topic, where you possibly have to revisit and sort of internalize more or build familiarity more is in these elements of these tiny details. Without tiny details also, you'll get 8 out of 15. 8 out of 15, because 3-4 questions will be like like anybody will know it. Okay, and then some moderate questions also, but the tiny details are the ones that will give you that 12, 13, possibly 14, and even possibly 15. Okay, so tiny details, small details. Okay, as regards to the legislative powers, the governor of a state is not part of the state legislature. The governor of a state has no emergency powers to meet the situation arising from external aggression. 1 only, 2 only, both, neither. What would be the answer?
Option D.
D for Delhi?
D for Delhi.
D for Delhi, okay. Okay. So that means you're saying that the governor is not part of the state legislature. So you're saying it is incorrect, because what is your state legislature? So state legislature is your, just like how we talked about in parliament, is your lower house, upper house, obviously if any, and the governor. Okay, so this is right, you've eliminated this. The governor of the state has no emergency powers. Has no emergency powers. So you will see, and I guess this will be a little clearer when we do emergency chapter, is that the emergency powers are with the president. Okay, now let us say there is a emergency external aggression. So what is happening is that, let us say, there is an invasion from China, or let us say there is a situation in the Pakistan border, or this border, that border, whatever it is. If that is the case, centrally we will have a national emergency sort of called for. And when the national emergency is called, okay, on account of external aggression, there will be certain sort of, there is Article 350, 58, 59. There are some articles that talk about, what are the sort of fundamental rights that are suspended, what happens to the, what are the things that happen, okay? Those things go on. Now, this is not the governor's cup of tea. This is more from the center. To deal with, the governor does not have emergency powers to deal with these areas. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
And just a second. If you look, go to your governor, page number 5, governor chapter, page number 5. Okay, now this is a good point that I can, these are all about like these fine details. Okay, which, while you might know this chapter really well, you could still have some easy sort of questions that go wrong because of this. And again, go to the 9th chapter of your president's chapter. The president's power. Okay, first one is executive. Second one they talk about is legislative. Third one they talk about is financial. Okay, fourth one they talk about is judicial. Fifth one they talk about is diplomatic. Okay, sixth one they talk about is military. Court martial, pardoning, we talked about those. And the seventh one they talk about is emergency. Okay, now the governor. Okay, this is in chapter, the governor chapter and page number 5. What do you have? Executive. You have legislature. You have financial. And you have judicial. So if I change this question, instead of no emergency powers to deal with blah, 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 what if I say does not have diplomatic powers or military powers? So this was not there. Military powers are not there and emergency powers are not there. So this, do you understand? 20% difference. Okay, these are part of your 80% common. Are you guys understanding what I'm trying to get at? Okay, now all of these things are about the finer details. Okay, and that is what sort of gets you from your 8, 7s and 8s out of 15 to your 12s and 13s. Does that make sense? So, and that is why I say that when you read your president, you read your governor as well. Okay, what is given in the president, what is given extra in the governor, and what is given extra in the president. So diplomatic power, military power, and emergency powers are extra for the president. At the same time, in governor, what do you have? Constitutional discretion of 5 points are extra in the chapter of governor. Is that clear? Okay, now that is totally fine. Okay, so far whatever you've been answering has been excellent, especially for first timers. But however, just realize that there are these fine details that you have to, it only comes with more and more revisions. Okay, more and more revisions. When I say do not, it means like daily revisions. Okay, more familiarity with the topics. And I'll tell you this, when I used to solve these polity questions, and I remember, if I get like one question wrong, sometimes it used to sort of mess with my head. I'm like, why did I go wrong with this? Okay, because my thing was about accuracy. Okay, I know this book so well. I have read this book so well. In fact, if you guys see my book, you will, you'll go crazy. Okay, the amount of notes that I've made, scribbled through my book, it's very difficult to see. And the number of different color highlights that I have. I have orange. I have like some fluorescent green. I have blue. I have pink. I have whole lot of things. It really means that if it is one color, that means revisit it once. There are some the fifth color you will see is that even after 5 revisions I've not been able to sort of keep it in my mind yet. So meaning if I have to revise it on the morning of my exam or the night of my exam, I'm going to go only at that. Okay, the things that I just cannot remember, right? So things like that, so I've gone through it like that. And even if I make a mistake, then so that means that I could sort of I'm sort of entitled to feel a little upset. And that is because I have read through these multiple times, especially trying to focus on that minor details. Okay, so you also focus on your minor details because all the major questions you've been able to do quite well. How do you do the minor details? Look at the president and the governor, Supreme Court and the High Court. Okay, if it is so things like that of that nature, state legislature, your parliament, it will make your job a lot easier, and you'll remember it better. Okay, it's around 9 o'clock, but we'll just take a look at a few more questions. Consider the following statements with respect to the powers of the governor of a state. The governor can summon, prorogue, dissolve the state assembly. The governor can adjourn the sittings of the state assembly. The governor addresses the first session of the legislative assembly after elections. The governor causes to lay the annual budget in the state assembly. Which of the following statements are correct? 1 and 2, 1, 3 and 4, 2 and 3, and 2 and 4. Think about it and take a call. So what would be the answer, guys? The governor can summon, prorogue, dissolve the state assembly. Is this true or false?
And that's true.
Okay, fine. So you're not eliminating this. The governor can adjourn the sittings of the state assembly. Is this true or false? Okay, so you're not comfortable or confident with this. That's fine. The governor addresses the first session of the legislative assembly after elections. Is this true or false? Okay, the governor causes to lay the annual budget in the state assembly. Is this true or false?
That's true.
So that you are sure is true. Okay, so you're not sure about, so you believe the answer is 1 and 4 are right. Okay, 2 and 3 you're not sure. Now if let us say that 2 and 3 you're not sure, what would be the option that you could possibly take?
Option B.
B as in B for Bombay.
B for Bombay.
Yeah, now see, adjourning of the sittings is by speaker. So if you're done with the business for the day, we adjourn. Okay, but summoning or proroguing or dissolving the state assembly, like bigger moves, this is by the president. This is by the president. Okay, and addressing the first session of the Legislative Assembly after elections. In fact, all of these things are sentences that are directly from your Laxmikanth. If you look at page number 6 of your legislative powers in your governor chapter, the very first point says he can summon, prorogue the state legislature and dissolve the state assembly as well. Excuse me. Okay, so and in financial powers, the major thing that you see in financial powers is that he sees that the annual financial statement or the state budget is laid before the state legislature. Direct sort of wordings from this, right? Okay, and some other ones will be given in some other chapters. So just to remember, so Parliament chapter, you'll understand who is going to adjourn this. Okay, the governor addresses the first session. Okay, the first session of the Legislative Assembly is going to be, there will be a speech by the governor, and in the center, who will be giving that speech? It'll be the president who sort of gives that speech. Okay, so things like that. Shall we continue for a few more questions? Not correct. The governor can issue ordinances in the Legislative Assembly. Sorry, when the Legislative Assembly is not in session, or only when two houses are not in session. Or only when two houses are not in session. The governor can, at his discretion, option B, the governor can, at his discretion, issue the ordinances, whether the assembly is in session or not. Option number C, the governor must be satisfied that such circumstances exist which render it necessary for him to take immediate action. The governor's ordinance shall have the same force and effect as an act of the legislature.
Option B.
Option B. Okay, good. Okay, option B. The president, the governor, okay, all these discretions are limited discretions, right? So discretion is not for introducing ordinances. Ordinances being, so the ordinance, who issues these ordinances? Is it the executive or is it the legislature?
The executive.
But the law-making duty is of the legislature, right?
So the Prime Minister issues the ordinance, so it becomes the executive.
That is correct. But shouldn't it be the job of the legislature to make laws? So what is the problem here? So that is why. So ordinance, again, we'll try to keep it a little more to the prelims mode. I don't want to go too much into mains or, elaborate things. We'll just try to keep it to prelims. Okay, just keep this in mind that a governor or the president, when you're sort of, this ordinance, right? When you're sort of issuing an ordinance, it is the executive doing that job. The Council of Ministers doing it. And that is why even the Supreme Court says that, it does not mean that you can raise an ordinance for anything and everything. It is supposed to be the job of the legislature, because when the executive does it, the executive, they work behind closed doors. Okay, we don't know if there is any debate or discussion or whatever it is. Okay, and even if there is, okay, it does not matter, because our representatives in your parliament or in your state legislative assembly have to go and put forth your position, and then debate, and then argue, and then sort of discuss, and then probably recommend some amendments or something like that. So when this is happening, that is why ordinances has got to be some sort of a one-time thing, or not one-time thing, but there should be a certain circumstance that exists for the executive to take immediate action. Okay, so the legislative's job is being taken over by the executive for a short period of time, and hence that has to be approved by the legislature. Okay, that has to be approved by the legislature. Is that clear? Okay, I hope that is extremely clear. Okay, so so all of these things, just do it holistically. Okay, think a little more critically about this, and then you will have a better idea. Another question: when a bill passed by the state legislature, it attempts to take away the powers of the High Court and is presented. Sorry, that's not the question. Is that the question? Which of the following are functions to which the scope of the discretionary powers of the governor are limited? In the appointment of the chief minister, the dismissal of the ministry, the dissolution of the legislative assembly, giving assent to bills. Okay, so you have messaged. Who's this? I think it is option C, 1, 3, and 4. Just go to governor chapter. Please go to the governor's chapter. Go to page number 9, 10, 11. 11 of the governor's chapter. Okay, in my old book, it is to, chapter number 24. In yours, I'm not sure. Which chapter is it? In that, you will again see, and if you want, we can go back to previous slides in which we talk about discretions. Okay, so this is the same sort of concept, right? So just replace governor for this, right? Appointment of the prime minister, or it will be the chief minister when no party has a clear majority. Okay, now that is one sort of situational discretion. Second thing is dismissal of the council of ministers. See, the council of ministers, the president has to act according to the council of ministers. Will the council of ministers recommend dismissal of their own group? No, they are not going to. Dissolution of the Lok Sabha if the Council of Ministers has lost its majority. The Council of Ministers will never agree or admit that they've lost the majority, or they're not going to recommend, right? So what happens is these are times when the governor or the president, if it is the in the center, they have to exercise their discretion. So what does that mean? Most of these questions, okay, because of the technical nature, it is going to be exactly how it is in your book, right? So that means appointment of the chief minister, okay, not at all times. Okay, it is not at all times. Of course, this question has to be a little more specific. Okay, it is when there is no clear majority. Okay, and the dismissal of the ministry, dissolution of the legislative assembly. Why is option 4 incorrect? Assent to the bills. So the bills are debated. So what is the procedure? So basically you will have a bill, okay, and bill has to go to House 1, okay, lower house or the upper house, and then it goes to House 2. Obviously it is going to go through step 1, step 2, step 3, or the first reading, second reading, third reading, possibly some joint select committee, a whole lot of things. And then House 2, and iske baad what happens? It actually goes to the president or the governor, depending upon whether we are talking about the state or we are talking about the center, right? Now this means the bill, this is your legislature. The legislature has passed, okay, but when you need the assent of the president slash governor, that means it is the executive. The final sort of order, okay, it comes from the council of ministers and they sort of approve it or they sort of reject it. Does that make sense? Now assent to bills, okay, this is not the president's discretion. It is going to be the council of ministers aid and advice. Does that make sense? Are you able to apply the logic now? Okay, so I hope this is clear. So I'm glad that we discussed this particular question. Now you have a better idea. So again, to summarize these sort of points, right? These sort of points exactly from your book. Okay, and this is something that you will see in the exam as well. In fact, even the wording will be quite similar. Okay, because a lot of it is from the Constitution. A lot of it will be from the Constitution, direct sort of terms. So you will have a familiarity. Actually, I have read something like this. In fact, I have read 3 of these points. Okay, but not as into the bills. So the point number 4 is going to be something that you eliminate because of your logic. Point number 1, 2, and 3 is basically your familiarity or memory. Does that make sense? So using both of these methods, you will be able to arrive at the right answer. You'll be able to arrive at the right answer. Okay, so I hope that is clear. Is that clear, guys? If you guys can give me an affirmative or a yes sir, that will be great. So I know.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So from the above, it is clear that the constitutional position of the governor differs from that of the president in a few aspects. One thing is, while the constitution envisages the possibility of the governor acting at times in his discretion. Okay, no such possibility is envisaged for the president. That means after the 42nd constitutional amendment, another point, ministerial advice has been made binding on the president. Why was this made? Okay, that is a more mains aspect. Okay, but this was 76th amendment was who was the prime minister at that point, and what happened in 1976? Did we have democracy? What was the state of affairs at that time?
Emergency.
Emergency.
Yeah, always remember that. And in case you're talking about some constitutional amendments, generally, this is the most important constitutional amendment. Okay, so it was made binding on the president. So let us say the Council of Ministers, okay, headed by the Prime Minister, is going to suggest that it is time to go for an emergency. The president has no other option but to listen. Okay, it has been made binding on the president. Okay, so the Constitution makes it clear that if any question arises whether a matter falls within the governor's discretion or not, the decision of the governor is final. So is it a governor's discretion or not? The decision of the governor is final. Okay, and the validity of anything done by him or undone by him rather as well, okay, on the ground that he ought to or ought not to have acted in that particular discretion. See, it is all sort of the decision of the governor is final. So remember this, highlight this. Now the governor has constitutional discretion. Okay, and what are they? Reservation of the bill for the president, recommendation of imposition of president's rule in the state. Obviously the Council of Ministers are now going to suggest that, right, while exercising his functions as an administrator if you're in Gujarat, and the next one. So we talked about all of these, right? So just try to sort of build a little more familiarity with this. And when dealing with AMTM, okay, what is AMTM? Okay, when you're dealing with your sixth schedule. Okay, and seeking information from the chief minister with regard to administrative legislative matters. Okay, all of these things, right? These are your constitutional discretions so these are constitutional. Now, apart from that, he also has or she also has situational discretion. Now, in case you're seeing this, for the very first, second, third time, this might still be confusing. So you might want to make a note and say that this is something that you have to revisit a few times. Okay, and then once you get that familiarity, you're not going to be able to forget it. Okay, at least not until prelims. Uske baad, then we'll see what we have to do. But at least till October 10th. When is the exam? October 7th, is it?
10th.
October 10th. So that means it is what, 70 something days? Okay, you will remember it. So just keep revisiting. Do you guys remember I told you, right? So polity is a subject at 20 to 30 minutes every day. Now it really depends. One more thing. Generally, there are two kinds of people. There are some of the students that I've noticed who are like, when I want to do a book, I'm doing it like so perfectly that I do not have to sort of revisit it again. Okay, I know that there are people who have that ability, but trust me, the ability, that sort of an ability is quite rare. Okay, and you do not want to keep on doing the same sort of a subject for an extended period until you're like 110% confident with that book, right? Because you don't have endless time. We're all working under certain constraints. What is the constraint? We have time constraint. So the idea is do as much as possible, but place that over a longer duration. Okay, so do day 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. So frequent revision is going to, you're probably going to benefit a lot more, okay, in terms of your recollection in less amount of time. So I think that will come in very, very handy. Okay, and in terms of situational discretion, so let's again, in terms of familiarity, I'm going to read it aloud so that it becomes second nature to you. So appointment of chief minister when no party has a clear-cut majority in the state legislative assembly, or when the chief minister in office dies suddenly and there is no obvious successor. What would the governor do? The governor probably is going to, let us just say that you just had elections. No party seems to have had um, a majority. Like just a few years ago, this happened with Karnataka, right? So you had, I think it was BJP with the highest number of seats, and then you had Congress, and the third was your JDS. But JDS played a kingmaker's role. So whichever side JDS went to or agreed to go to, that side is going to be in power. The other side has to be the opposition, right? So generally, what if you were a governor? What are you going to do? You're going to be like, hey, you seem to be the biggest power here. How about you try to form a government? And if you can muster up enough numbers, okay, a majority, okay, total number of seats divided by 2 plus 1. If you can get that, then nothing like it. You can become the chief minister. If not, what are you going to do? I'm going to have to invite somebody else to sort of form the government. Do you guys know Atal Bihari Vajpayee? The first time he formed his government in the late 1990s, it was a 13-day government or something. And post that, it was a 13-month government. And then finally, he had managed to get a whole term. And I don't think it was a whole term, it was like 4.5 years, after which they went for early elections. India Shining, that was their logo. That was their sort of big message for elections. But in 2004, they lost that election. Right, and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, he's a very prominent figure. In fact, he's been in politics and he's been contributing in parliament through his debates since a very, very long time. In fact, when 1962 war against the Chinese, when India did not do too well, he had requested Nehru, who was the prime minister at that particular period, to sort of entertain a discussion on this. And then he very forcefully and very, it was there in the last couple of years in one of the frontline magazines, how exactly and what were the sort of arguments and very well argued cogent points by Atal Bihari Vajpayee, 1960s itself. So is that clear? Okay, apart from that, you have dismissal and dissolution. Okay, we've seen this. So do not forget this. The de jure head of the state government is dash. Do you guys know what the term means?
Is it de facto?
No, it is like, so you have good that you're bringing both together. So you have a de jure and then you have a de facto. De facto is the real sort of head. Okay, now this is the titular. Does that make sense? So de jure and de facto. So who is going to be the de jure head of the state government? It's going to be your governor. What about the de facto? Who is the real head of the state government? Who is the real sort of person working here?
Chief Minister.
Chief Minister. But this will not be true if this question, instead of applying it to the Indian system, if you apply this to US, right? The de facto head of the state government in the United States will be. Have you heard of a chief minister in the United States? Can you name any chief ministers? You have not, because you don't have chief ministers in the US. However, you have elections for the states. And in those, okay, in order for you to rule the state, you are going to become a governor. So elections for a governor. The governor does, most of the job that the chief minister does in India. So if you look at a president, presidents generally come from two positions. Okay, you can either be a senator from the Senate, right? Barack Obama came from the Senate. Now there are some people who come from, from governor. Okay, for instance, Bill Clinton, he was a governor of one of the states, Arkansas. Okay, and if you talk about George Bush, do you guys know George Bush, 2000 to 2008? So he was the governor of state of Texas. So he had contested in Texas for the de facto sort of ruling power, which is your governor's role there. Okay, so keep that in mind. So de jure and de facto. So the governor is the chief executive of the state, but like the president, he is a nominal executive, titular executive, a constitutional head. The governor can also act as an agent of the central government. Therefore, the office of the governor has a dual role. The appointment is done by whom? It is generally by the president. It is by the president, and the governor holds the position during the pleasure of the president. And when we say president, whom do we mean? It is a council of ministers headed by the chief minister. Sorry, the prime minister. Okay, by the prime minister. The chief minister in the scheme of parliamentary system of government provided by our constitution, the governor is a nominal executive and the chief minister is a real executive. So de jure, okay. So just remember, chief minister here, nominal executive. Okay, no questions here, right? When can the governor of the state issue an ordinance?
Option C.
Option C. So when the union government asks him to do so, the union government is not going to ask him.
Option C.
Option C. So Aishwarya, Manvi, okay, great. Okay, so it is going to be option C. This has nothing to do with the judiciary. Judiciary has certain other roles, okay, to resolve disputes. That is the role of the judiciary, right? The role of the judiciary is to resolve disputes and can also act as checks and balances. Checks and balances. Meaning, checks and balance for a judiciary, how will they do this? Let us say through judicial review. Judicial review means what? So let us say executive comes out with a particular policy, or they are trying to implement something, but that goes against the constitution, the tenets of our constitution. What would happen? The judicial the judiciary is going to come into play. They're going to have they're going to entertain cases, whether it's PIL or they're going to club all the cases that are filed in different courts, and they're going to say, is this in within the authority that the executive, are they allowed to do this? Okay, is it within the constitutional principles? Does it go against the basic structure? If not, they can strike it down. Okay, I'll give you an example. In 1990, early 1990s, late 1980s, Mandal Commission recommendation was sort of put into play. Do you guys know what Mandal Commission was? So Mandal Commission, again, it is given in your class 12 NCRTs. Okay, or if you've done your India after independence. Okay, if you've done India since independence, you would have read it. So Mandal Commission was during VP government, okay, early 1990s. During their election, they said that if elected to power, we will try to bring in this policy that was recommended by Mandal, which then the Mandal Commission, the person was PP Mandal, he tried to introduce something, he was appointed as the head of a committee that were to look into some things. And what is that thing? For the socially and educationally backward classes, should we, what are the ways in which you can sort of improve their lot? And for that, they gave out a whole lot of recommendations. And one of those recommendations was that, they require a certain amount of reservation. So before that, reservation was only for SC and ST. Now, do you guys know what is the reservation for SC, for ST, OBC? And then nowadays you have economically weaker sections. Okay, weaker sections. Okay, so before 1990, you had only these. So for your SC reservation is 15%. Okay, what about ST reservation? ST reservation is 7.5%. So only 22.5% reservation was there. When OBCs were given reservation, okay, because of Mandal Commission, because of VP government, that added 27% of reservation. And recently, if you've noticed, in the last 1-2 years, I think from 2019, I believe, 2019, and this will be the second year, 10% reservation for economically weaker sections. And the criteria is that you should not own a home which is like 999 square feet, and some other criteria which I'm not, I don't know yet. Okay, it must be given in the application form. Now, if you see, only till here it was there. So 27% was introduced later. Now, what happened? Obviously, this is going to be a matter of intense debate, right? Some people are going to feel that this is, what is the criteria to identify socially and educationally backward classes? Okay, what kind of recommendations, okay, are required? So in that, there were a lot of cases that were sort of brought to court. The court decided to hear the case. What are the arguments in favor? For instance, people react strongly because such a decision is going to affect thousands of job opportunities, right? Some felt that the existence of inequalities amongst people of different castes in India required us to make reservations in jobs. They felt, okay, the ones who are in support, that this would give a fair opportunity to those communities and castes who generally did not or were not adequately represented in government employment in higher level sort of positions. But however, there were members who were against the move as well, right? They considered it to be unfair. It'll deny inequality of opportunity. Equality of opportunity, especially to those who do not belong to the backward communities or the socially and educationally backward communities. They will be denied jobs. They would be, even though they will be a little more qualified. Okay, so some felt that this would perpetuate more caste feelings because, your jobs depend on castes and whatnot. Okay, so you understand, right? Pros and cons. So when it went to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court is the one that is going to take a look at, this checks and balance. And in that, they say that, no, this is not against the Constitution. In fact, this is a welcome move. The only thing is that please try to ensure that it is not for every OBC, but only for those OBCs, okay, who do not come under creamy layer. And creamy layer also has certain criteria. I think it is like 8 lakhs annually or something like that. Again, it will be there in the application form. So judiciary has those sort of rules, right? But the governor of the state, he is the one who is responsible to issue ordinances, and under what conditions. We've seen this, right? So again, when you read these answers, please try to take a look not only at what is the right answer, but also the ones that are not the right answers as well. You can learn from those as well. Okay, under article blah blah blah, the governor may. What are the options that you have when you're with regard to a bill? Can you withhold your assent to a bill passed by the state legislature? Can you reserve the bill passed by the state legislature for the consideration of the president? Return a bill other than a money bill for reconsideration of the legislature?
Option D.
Which would be Bombay?
No. 1, 2, and 3.
Option 1, 2, and 3. Withhold his assent to a bill passed by the state legislature. Of course, he can do it. Reserve a bill for the state by the state legislature for the president. Yes, that is true as well. Return a bill. Of course, it cannot be a money bill. Okay, it cannot be a money bill. Okay, great. Okay, great. Now, a quick question. Do we have joint sitting? Can you call for a joint sitting?
I think only in case of bicameral legislature. I-
Let us say there are 6 states or certain states that have bicameral legislature, and the state legislative assembly sort of has passed something and the state legislative council is not agreeing to it. Now, if this happens in the center, we say that there is a chance of or this is what we can call as a deadlock. And when you have a deadlock, the president can call for a joint sitting, right, which is going to be presided by the speaker. Is this part of the 80%, which is very similar between the center and the states, or is it part of the 20%, which is different from the center, okay, and the states? So it is part of the 20%. It is not the same. So states, okay, states only joint sitting illa. Okay, so there are no, joint sitting is not something that you have in your states. Joint sitting is only in the center. Okay, so Rajya Sabha has a little more power than your state legislative councils because Rajya Sabha can force a joint sitting. So meaning if they reject something that the state government or the Lok Sabha had wanted, you can call for, you can make it a deadlock and then you can have a joint sitting. Okay, and you can debate it further, but you don't have that sort of power for the state legislative in the states. Okay, so I hope that is clear. Yes, and this one is answer is D. Okay, again, don't worry about this. It takes time, takes a few more readings. If possible, just note it down somewhere and try to revisit this. Okay, but this will be part of, this is not a harder kind of question. In fact, we have discussed this as well. But again, this is what we say,
All right, guys. So that brings us to the close of our video. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you found the video to be useful. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the very next video.